That carton of milk in your fridge might cost twice as much depending on which side of the border you live on. Today, we're breaking down Canada versus US milk prices in 2026 liter by liter. From government rules and quota systems to falling US prices and rising Canadian grocery bills, everything is on the table. If you want to know who's really paying more and why, watch through to the end because the final comparison changes how this gap actually works. Milk prices went crazy. But why? Nesta, have you ever been at the fridge, stared at that carton of milk, and thought, wait, why does this feel like a luxury right now? Because here's a truth that'll pull you in before we even compare countries. Canada just raised the base cost of milk for farmers by over 2% in 2026, a change set by the Canadian Dairy Commission that ripples all the way to your grocery aisle. That seems small, 2.32% change, but think of it this way. Raw milk costs are now officially higher than they were last year, and that's just the start. Costs like feed, labor, transportation, and packaging are all squeezing farmers, processors, and yes, you. So what does that feel like at the store? If your family buys milk weekly, that few cents per liter adds up fast. Groceries are already one of the biggest chunks of most household budgets, and it's part of a story bigger than Canada alone. Here's the twist most people miss. These pricing changes happen long before we see them on shelves. Policy decisions in Ottawa echo all the way to your kitchen, long before the milk jug hits your cart. But here's where it gets really interesting. Because right across the border, the price scene is moving in the opposite direction. And that repositioning is reshaping American milk entirely. And that gap, you're about to see just how far it has widened. When Canada pays more, imagine this. A 4-liter bag of milk in Ontario hit around $6.51 in late 2025. That's how much everyday milk costs at average stores. Now convert that into US pricing. That same volume is roughly $5.89 when you adjust for currency and volume. That's already a jaw dropper if you're Canadian and watching prices climb in your own cart. The reason most people never notice this gap is that price tags don't include the economics behind them. Canada's dairy system uses supply management, meaning quotas and regulated pricing keep farm-to-store prices stable, but often higher than in open markets. That safety net for farmers hits your wallet because cheese, cream, milk cost more here on average than many US cities. Meanwhile, across the border, the data tells a different story. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the average price for a gallon, 3.8 liters, of whole milk was around $4 in November 2025. A real-world number shoppers are paying in everyday grocery aisles. And here's the kicker. While Canadian milk prices have increased annually, some US dairy indexes are actually drifting downward, or flat, partly due to higher milk production and price shifts for Class 1 milk. Now this raises the big question every shopper secretly wonders. Are we just paying more because of inflation, or is something deeper at play? The price gap between Canada and the US. Let's get into the actual numbers you need to hear. In Canada, the average retail price for a liter of milk recently hovered around $3.09, $3.10 in grocery stores. And that's just the per liter cost before you fill a 4-liter bag in your cart. Now flip the map south. In the US, the average retail price for a gallon of whole milk, approximately 3.8 liters, was about $4.42 in 2025. A record high, but still translates to roughly $1.17 to $1.24 per liter when you break it down. Do the math in Canadian dollars at exchange rates, and American milk can end up significantly cheaper than what most Canadians pay per liter at home. A shock if you're used to thinking domestic grocery prices are stable, predictable, part of everyday life. Part of this is rooted in policy. Canada's supply management system deliberately raises the base price farmers receive to reflect production costs. The U.S. system moves differently, with federal pricing support programs historically stabilizing farm prices in certain ways, but letting open competition among retailers keep grocery prices varied and often lower. Here's the real twist. A comprehensive study once found Canadians approximately pay nearly 30% more per liter than Americans, and that gap shows up again even in recent data. So, when you see milk on the shelf in your local grocery store, what you're really seeing isn't just dairy. It's a snapshot of policy and economics and lifestyle differences between two countries. Why does milk cost more today? Here's where the real price puzzle gets intense. Over the past year, Canadian milk prices rose about 8.8%, while U.S. milk prices actually fell by roughly 12% in the same period, according to one field price report tracking actual store data. That means Canadians are paying more for a staple, while Americans see slightly lower prices right now. Let's zoom in on some everyday numbers. In the US, the average price for a gallon of fresh whole milk, about 3.8 liters, was around $4 in November 2025, based on federal price measurement data. That's a real-world snapshot of what people are scanning at checkout lanes. Meanwhile, cost of living data suggests a liter of milk in Canada can cost around $2.21 to $2.25, significantly higher than the US per liter when you convert currencies directly for comparison. That puts Canada well above the global average retail milk price. Governments are starting to pay attention too. In late 2025, Manitoba's premier flagged differential pricing on groceries, including milk, as a cost of living target for reform, showing this issue has real political weight in Canada. While prices shift, production trends are changing too. Canada's milk production is expected to grow only modestly next year, tightening supply math even further. And if you think those price tags are the final word, there's a surprising cost battle hidden in how families can save every single week. But before we continue, remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on a single pricing video. How inflation really hits your milk prices. Here's where the milk price story turns sharp. Across Canada, milk prices have been climbing steadily, and a recent report found that 4-liter milk prices rose 8.8%, while U.S. milk prices actually fell about 12% over a similar period. The only direction most shoppers never hear about. Wait, what does that mean in real terms? Let's break it down with common retail numbers so the difference hits your grocery cart. In the United States, the average price for a gallon, approximately 3.8 liters, of fresh whole milk was around $3.97 as of November 2025. Real government data tracked monthly. Meanwhile, in Canada, typical cost of living survey figures show a liter of milk averaging about $2.19 to $2.25, which, when you do the math, makes milk significantly more expensive per liter here than in the US. That means you might pay nearly double per liter here compared with average US pricing, even after exchange rates. That's inflation you feel, not just read about. So what's pushing this? Part of it lies in broader food inflation. Statistics Canada says grocery prices climbed about 4.7% year over year, a clear sign that food inflation isn't minor. It's leading price trends in stores. And here's the twist. Dairy prices rising faster than many other staples means milk becomes a bellwether staple, a canary in the grocery inflation coal mine. On top of that, provincial governments like Manitoba's are targeting differential pricing because citizens are feeling the cost crunch at checkout, especially on essentials like milk. But there's more inflation insight that most people overlook. Because understanding how much you could be saving starts with seeing when and where prices spike most. How families actually feel. Milk. The price inflation. You think grocery price tags are random, but these increases have real consequences, and they're documented year after year. Let's ground this in the data that shoppers feel in their carts. In 2026, StatCan's monthly retail data shows that average prices for food products, including staples like milk, are tracked systematically. Here's one piece most folks never realize: statistics. Canada's food cost tables are updated monthly and show milk among the products that feed into overall grocery inflation trends. Why does this matter? Because food inflation in Canada is rising faster than headline inflation. According to Canada's Food Price Report 2026, Canadian families are expected to spend up to 994 Canadian dollars more on food next year, with grocery prices forecast to rise 4% to 6% overall. While average food prices spike, in many Canadian regions, milk costs vary widely. A study of Canadian grocery pricing found that a 4-liter jug can go for around $4.65 at Costco Sudbury in Ontario, while convenience store prices for smaller containers can exceed $4.99 per 2 liters. That's nearly double the per-liter cost in some places. And yes, even though some analysts point out differences between Canadian and US prices can vary, multiple studies calculate that milk in Canada ends up about 20% to 29% more expensive on average than in the US after adjusting for currencies. Real-world saving strategies. Every family should know. Let's get practical. Milk isn't just a number on a receipt, it's a weekly staple. In Canada, the average retail cost per liter often sits around $2.19 Canadian, about twice as high as the average US price of around $1.06 US per liter. That's what cost of living data shows when you compare markets side by side. That difference feels huge when you're pushing a cart full of groceries, especially if you have a family. But here's one strategy savvy shoppers use: cheapest stores first. Discount grocery chains, bulk members-only stores, and weekly flyer deals make a bigger dent than you might expect. For example, buying larger volumes at big club stores typically lowers the unit price compared with smaller cartons at premium grocers. Another key idea most consumers miss is regional variation. Milk can cost significantly more in Atlantic Canada compared with Ontario or the prairies, simply because transportation and store competition vary widely across regions. Then there's the timing advantage. Watching or tracking weekly flyers actually works. Many stores run limited time specials on basics like milk, cheese, and eggs, precisely to lure shoppers in with low prices on essentials, then hope you buy other items once you're in store. Here's something jaw-dropping. One ongoing data report found milk prices in Canada climbed about 8.8% while average US milk prices declined by roughly 12% over the same comparative period. This isn't a small gap, it's a huge opportunity for strategic savings if you know where to shop. What happens when milk is just one of many skyrocketing staples? The next section shows how grocery inflation overall is quietly reshaping household budgets. What's really happening with grocery inflation? And milk. Let's cut straight to data most news barely touches. Canada's Food Price Report predicts a family of 4 will spend about 17,572 Canadian dollars on groceries in 2026, roughly $994 more than the year before. That's real inflation hitting households where it hurts. Here's the shocker. While some categories might seem stable, food prices overall were up by about 4 to 6% overall, with groceries rising faster than many other parts of the Canadian Consumer Price Index. Grocery prices just for food items climbed 4.7% year over year, the fastest pace in over 2 years. And milk is part of this bigger picture. Statistics. Canada's data shows the average retail price for 2 liters of milk was about $5.38 in October 2025, making basic dairy a significant component of grocery inflation. But inflation isn't affecting all regions uniformly. In response, political leaders are talking about policy changes. In late 2025, Manitoba's premier publicly proposed cracking down on differential pricing, including on milk, to tackle price discrepancies across stores and online platforms. Here's the less obvious twist most shoppers overlook. Inflation on milk isn't just about milk itself. It's embedded in the entire food system that shapes what you pay for eggs, bread, meat, and more. That's why food cost reports forecast significant grocery price increases again in 2026, even if headline inflation seems stable. If that surprised you, tell us what milk costs where you shop. And if you want more eye-opening price stories like this, remember to hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.